Well, thank you guys for choosing to join our session this morning. Our session is called Data Exploration with Smart Mapping in Online. And I'm Jennifer Bell. I'm a cartographer, geographer on the Living Atlas team at Esri.
And I'm Jim Herries. I'm also a geographer at Esri, working with Jennifer on the Living Atlas team.
Yeah. So some of you guys are developers, some not, but I bet all of you are thinking, how can I use smart mapping, or why should I use smart mapping in my design or my cartography or data analysis? So today we want to talk about some really exciting enhancements related to data-driven workflows, intelligent defaults, coordinated styling, automated scale ranges, thematic renderers, and streamlined interfaces. So all of this, the smart mapping, really is for experts. It's also for beginners. It makes your life a lot easier. You can work a lot faster with more confidence and less effort. So we have 5 main topics today. We're going to start off with what exactly is smart mapping, how do we map locations of things, what things are, how do we map categories, quantities, so how much, how do we map relationships in our data? So how does one layer, a variable, relate to another? And then this is a fun wizardy type category. How do you make maps when the data doesn't exist? So it's going to be a mix of discussion. We're going to show a lot of math examples, a lot of demos, and end with a Q&A. So this is the overall picture, our outline. So the 5 categories are shown in bright blue, red, purple, green, and then orange. So we're going to start with what is smart mapping. So do you want to?
Yeah, we're going to share with you a little bit. It's an ongoing project at Esri. That's why it's not capital S, smart mapping. There's no smart mapping button. Have any of you found a smart mapping button in the product? No. It's more of a philosophy of how we're modernizing the product over time because we've seen how our customers make smart maps. And I know in my case, when I was in professional services 20-something years ago, every smart map we made was sort of beholden to the custom application in which it was built. It was almost like you had to go get this expert cartographer, get them to sit down with the subject matter expert. Let's say it's about sales or profit. And then you'd have to get those two to talk, right? The cartographer and the subject matter expert. And then the data person walks in the room and tells you what you can or can't do with the database. And then the GIS person has to join the conversation. And then the project manager walks in and blows it all up with the schedule, right? And so what we notice over time is a lot of these best practices end up being implemented one by one. And how could we kind of learn from each of these experiences and just pull out what are the common things happening to make that map functional, useful, occasionally beautiful, but beauty is not a business objective for many maps. A lot of times we just need to get the right information to the right person. And we noticed over time as a company, we noticed that a lot of times our own software was kind of making that a challenge. And that's good if you write code and you can overcome challenges. It's bad if you're trying to expedite the research on a topic and you want a broader and broader group of users to be able to use your maps and your data efficiently and effectively. So we thought about how can we kind of burn some of these good cartographic practices, good ways of thinking about the data. How can we modernize the interface to solve common problems people have when they're trying to make a smart map? Should it always be a Herculean effort to make a great map? And that's our ongoing challenge. So we're going to show you a couple of solutions that you guys can develop as you go along. So let's go to the next. So example maps like this where there's strong visual impressions, in the top right corner, that's a map of USDA county data. You see any county boundaries? No. But you definitely see a strong pattern, and in the yellow, those are the counties where corn is the #1 crop by far. It's the predominant crop being produced in those counties. Purple is wheat, and so on. So how do you get to these maps? We try to use smart mapping. But first, before we make any map, we have to stop. And if I can give you one secret to making great maps is slow down. Slow everybody down in the project and remember to ask the question, why am I making this map? Because so often we'll build the software, we'll build the hardware, we'll implement it. we'll get the data ready, we'll get the project going, we'll build the application, and only at that point does the map come out. And by then, I've seen it time after time on projects, we're out of time. We don't have time to make this good. I can't tell you how many times as a cartographer I've been told, we don't have time for you to make this pretty. It's a very demeaning way of kind of saying, we don't really care what the information product is. We already did all the hard work of the technological work. Yet the irony is, you did all that work, and you didn't finish the job, right? You didn't deliver the beautiful map or the useful map, depending on what your objective is. Now, we are biased towards useful maps. And a model I like to talk about is this. We have reality. We all operate in some version of reality. And then we collect data about it in various ways, from sensors or from sales records or whatever the source of your data is. Your data now represents reality. Is your data reality? Let's have a beer and discuss that, but I would argue that it's important to remember your data is separate from reality. It attempts to be a representation of reality, but data by itself is not really good at communicating. We found that on the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. They had all the data telling them that booster had a problem, but it was buried in these numbers and they couldn't extract what they need in time to make a difference. It's up to analysis and interpretation of the data, and that's where we step in. And we make maps and charts and user experiences out of that interpretation. So that's part of the cycle we all live in, whether you're a cartographer, a user interface designer, a system designer, a business analyst type person, you're somewhere on that value chain of getting reality. And the important thing is we take action based on what these things tell us. So if your maps, your charts, your user experience aren't very good at representing good analysis, good interpretation, then that affects our perception of reality, and we take the actions that we take actions that we might not take if certain information were revealed. So our goal is always to reveal what we can. So that's the whole reason we drive to. So a good example is here's a database table about body temperature. It says in this table, Jim Herries has a body temperature of 98.6 degrees. Jennifer, you've got a 98.6. There's a Mr. Sneeze at a 99.1, and someone else with 103 body temperature in this room. So if one of you were to actually have 103 body temperature in this room, and let's say it was sitting right next to you, ma'am, what would you likely do? You'd get up and move. Now, notice that I did not tell anyone in this room that 98.6 is quote-unquote normal body temperature. It's a reference point. It has a scientific meaning, and we all grew up with it either in Fahrenheit or Celsius. It's 37.1, I guess. That reference point is the whole key to interpreting this data, isn't it? Right? Without 98.6, this is meaningless. If an alien landed on Earth and saw this data, and I don't know, all these people keep dying for some reason. And what I notice is they all have 103 degree temperatures just before they die. Right. Okay, so that interpretation is enabled because we have this shared knowledge. What do you do if you have to make a map where the knowledge isn't shared? How often do you run into that? I'd argue you run into that all the time, and your users, your customers, are also fearful of that. My observation over 20 years of making maps is we run into it 80% of the time. 80% of people have no idea what your map is showing. And oftentimes, the techniques we use actually bury the message rather than expose it. So if I can make you sensitized to the fact that you might need to do just a little tiny bit more work to get the best out of your data, you can then expose the information in the right way and get the right user experience. One of my favorite photos I ever searched up on the internet. Your user experience of this is suboptimal. Let's go to the next one. So with smart mapping, our whole goal is how can we make brilliant maps enable our customers and enable our business partners, our developers to deploy apps where brilliant maps can happen quickly. You can do the work with confidence. We want to simplify the map authoring experience. How many of you grew up with ArcInfo? Yeah, there's always a few. Avenue, ArcView, yeah. Visual Basic, what was it called? Map Objects, yeah. right? Objects. Okay, ArcObjects. Like there's this river of technology that keeps going by. We want to give you these little islands where you can stand on and fish safely and efficiently. And smart mapping is one of those islands. So how do we use data-driven workflows so that you can make the right choices at the right time? We're going to show this. Let's just show this at this point. And our whole goal is this. The democratization of data visualization is happening. So it's more important than ever that if the tools make it easier and easier and easier to make any kind of map, well, it's really important that we get the right attitudes and philosophies and understand exactly what we're doing when we're touching that data. So that's what this session's going to be all about. We're now going to stop talking and slides. We're going to actually show some maps.
Yeah, it's a really great description of what smart mapping is. So let's dive into the map and go into some demos. So first we're going to take a very beginner look at simply mapping where things are. A lot of times just mapping where something is, you really see patterns initially. So start off simple and then we'll take it deeper as we go through. So mapping where, we can map every single furniture sale made in Los Angeles. We can map all the bus routes in Massachusetts. And then we can also map what. So what is kind of like dimensions. Think of your data as dimensions and measures. The dimensions are like classes, types, names, categories, districts, territories. And when you add your layer to the ArcGIS Online map, there will be a drawing style called type. So this is an example of what, if your data is a type data. So we can go into a couple examples. One is the Ontario Mills Mall directory, and the other one is bus routes. So this is the outline of a mall nearby, and this is the final look of the map, and we can go through and show you how to make something like this. So we start with our source layer. It has the outlines of every store and the name of every store. Here's the table, so the type of store, the website of the store, and we can go into smart mapping, which is this change style icon in your ArcGIS Online map. And the first step is to choose your attribute. So we can show location only, so that was mapping where are all the stores, or we can map what, so the category or the type of store. So I have a field called type, and smart mapping has really smart defaults. So it recognizes that you chose a field that has different categories. So it's going to suggest this type's unique values option. We can go in and see the count. So there are 94 clothing stores. This is the largest count for a certain category. 28 specialty stores. We can change the fill. So if we want a darker fill, you immediately see the change on your map. So you don't have to go and click OK a billion times. You get to play around and completely, immediately experience
What if I don't
the map.
like that particular color?
You can click on the color. You can change it here, or you can add your own hex value.
So for those of you who have customers who are very particular about their values, for example, the American Planning Association has a certain red that is to be applied to residential parcels. You can use their exact red.
Right.
A lot of times that's how we brand our maps to make our customers feel super comfortable with what we've done. They won't necessarily give you a document that says, here, use our colors to make these maps. We'll go look for a style sheet or a branding guide from the company, and we'll just liberally borrow their colors, burn it into the map, and they're like, wow, I really like these maps for some reason. Yes, you do.
We did that with the city of Long Beach. Their logo was dark blue and bright blue, and so we literally used Color Picker and chose their hex values of their logo and made maps in those color schemes.
So our objective is to make people comfortable with a map, not teach them to be cartographers. Right. There's a huge difference, right?
Right. Here's a location map. So where are the bus routes? But say we worked for a tourist industry and we wanted to make a map of the seasonal routes. So we can, this one also has a type field. And so we've got year-round in red, and seasonal going to the water in blue. This is a fun example that Jim made of Sonic stores. You want to describe this map?
Yeah, Jeremy Bartley and I are big fans of Sonic, and for whatever reason. And this is an example where if you were to map this just using a dot on the map and show it to the owners of Sonic, they'd be like, oh, okay, nice map. But you can actually go pull the, I don't know if it would still show, but you can drop a URL to any image hosted somewhere out there. In my case, I went and found a Sonic, I'll be honest, I found the Sonic logo on the web, I downloaded it to my machine, and then I went to my content in ArcGIS Online. I uploaded that item as an item in ArcGIS Online. I grabbed its URL and then I dropped it in there so that I know I personally am responsible for this logo being up for the duration of this demo. And again, the power of showing somebody their own data using their own colors and logos is a very useful thing. That's the point of this map.
And then what's going on over here? Got so many logos overlapping each other. Is there a...
Yeah, so one of the other options is this heat map option, if you want to open that up. A lot of times we'll do this to kind of communicate density in a non-scientific way. This is just a general impression of how concentrated these things are. It's not the same as some of the other techniques Esri has available for generating heat maps. This is just to give someone a sense of intensity at a visceral level, not a scientific level. So a lot of times we'll use one in combination with the other. A good technique is to pick one and kind of settle on that, and let's hit OK. And then,
like that one.
And then at a certain scale, turn on both so that you get the heat and the restaurants. You know, maybe not at this scale, maybe zoom in one or two, so that you can show intensity and then have at least one scale at which the points and the heat are shown at the same time. And I think that's what we were attempted to do there. Let's go on to the next one.
Yep. Alrighty, so we just mapped where and what. So quick review, anytime you touch an attribute, the map immediately responds. So you get this iterative process. You can do trial and error, you can test out different colors, different schemes. It immediately gives you feedback on your data. And also, when you simply map where, a lot of interesting patterns or stories emerge. So we'll go on.
And that's a trend we see. No matter what map you make, a lot of times it'll cause you to ask additional questions. It's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That causes ongoing business, ongoing relationship. There's never, we argue with people, there's never a bad map. There's just a map that is either satisfying or it's not satisfying. And if it's satisfying, let's go down the avenue of that discussion. If this map is not satisfying to someone, there's a business opportunity perhaps to talk to them more about, well, what exactly are you looking for? How much? So we mapped where, and now we're going to talk about quantities, how much.
So we're mapping what, which is a dimension. So mapping how much is like a measure. So totals, percentages, averages, medians, ratios, rates. So when you add your field, when you choose the field that you want to map, Smart Mapping will recognize it and say, okay, well, let's map it either with this choropleth counts and amounts fill, or we can show it with symbol size, like the county map you were talking about earlier. You didn't see the county boundaries. We chose to show it with proportional symbols. So you can convert a polygon to a point. So we'll look at some examples. We've got Los Angeles furniture sales, traffic in Florida, earthquake magnitude, and population. So earlier we saw the mapping where. So where are all the furniture sales? But then we can ask a deeper question, well, how much did each sale, like what was the revenue of each sale?
Yeah, like if you can, just stare at this map for a second. If you're in the office with the CFO or the head of sales, director of sales, and you show this map, you know, it's what we kind of call a feel-good map. Look, boss, we have sales all throughout Los Angeles. But remember, what that person's thinking is, what is this really telling me? I know I have sales throughout Los Angeles. What I want to know is, where are we peaking and where are we falling off? Where are the trends? What's hot, what's not? What are the sales territories where I have overperformance? So they're always looking for an angle. And I call it a facet or an edge. Just what is the exact thing they're interested in about this data? And sometimes we have to show them a few examples to get them talking.
So this one shows the revenue. So which sales actually made the company a lot of money? So these areas in bright green have high revenue, and the larger the symbol, the larger the revenue. So we're mapping this one field with both color and size. So do you want to go through this?
I want to, yeah. Can you show how Can you just show how to do just size? Just size. Just map the size of the sales.
So first step, choose your field. So we're going to choose revenue, and we'll watch what smart mapping suggests to us at first.
So smart mapping looks at that revenue field. It says, oh, hey, this attribute field, it's not text, it's a number.
Right.
So now we've narrowed the number of types of maps that are reasonable to make. And we said, okay, and furthermore, smart mapping looks at the type of field. It says, is this a float? It has decimal places, or is it an integer? And it takes an educated guess. Well, in this case, it looks like it's an integer. So I'm going to go ahead and symbolize this by size, right? Because I'm going to take a guess that this is a count or an amount of some kind. Because if it were a rate, it probably would be stored as a float. Not always. I mean, we haven't invented software that can read your mind. If we do, I'll let you know. But what we can do is try to detect little hints about what might be going on here. And so in this case, it said, okay, I'm going to take a guess that this is some kind of count field. And go ahead and hit options, and let's see what else it tells us about this thing. So this is my favorite part of smart mapping right here, because this is the art of how you make a great map. You've got a histogram, it's vertical. Do you mind hitting the zoom in and see if it'll zoom in on that histogram? Maybe not today, all right. But you've got a histogram of the data, and if you pause over the X bar, it says the average sale in this data set is $787. Well, there's a new piece of information you didn't know before. Or maybe you did, and maybe you've got the director of sales in your office saying, my goal is $1,000 a sale. What's going on? Show me all the sales where the revenue exceeds $1,000. Now, how might we do that? Well, we might just touch that lower threshold and set it at $1,000. And what we're saying is, you're going to get a tiny symbol size if you don't meet the boss's criteria. In fact, we could go, if we can scroll down, we can really punish those sales on the map, drop them to about a 4-point size, right? Like, these sales don't matter is what this map is saying. Now, whether that's true or not, that's for you to figure out with your customer. But you have the tools here to very easily just kind of play with the relationship between min and max values in the histogram and the size of the symbol. And the other end of the spectrum, drag that, right now, smart mapping always shoves, for proportional symbols, it always puts that at the max value. But if you kind of said, you know, we'd be happy with any sales over $3,000, right? So Jennifer and I are kind of playing a role play game, or I'm kind of the director of sales, offering my intelligence, and she's operating the software. There's a little transfer of knowledge going on here. We've noticed over time with smart mapping that eventually the smart people figure out, I don't need you anymore. I know how to operate a slider bar. And by extension, I know how to tell my developers, hey, I worked with the director of sales live in a web map with their data. She and I have a relationship. We understand each other. Your breakpoints you need to use in all your maps is 1,000 and 3,000. Go write it in the code, right? And that's the purpose of smart mapping. And the whole purpose for this presentation is to show you how you can use this off-the-shelf application in the ArcGIS Online web map. You can play with the data, get comfortable, develop that conversation, and then share that knowledge out to your developers so they can implement it in code, or they can just call this web map, hit save. That's the web map to use. That's probably the easiest way to get started, is go author the exact web map you want and hand that web map to your developer to use in their application. Let's move on.
This 1,000 number, any sale below 1,000 gets a very, very small point. That's exactly what you were talking about with the 98.6 body temperature. That's the magic number. So every industry will have their numbers, and you talk to the people that know them, and you set your map to go around those numbers.
As compared to,
anything?
let's spread it out again.
Okay.
A lot of GIS maps historically do this. They just say, well, we couldn't possibly tell you what's interesting in this histogram of data, so we're going to give you everything on the map. We're going to spread the symbology from 4 points to 50 points, from the min value to the max value. This is what we call an outlier-driven map. The outlier value, the largest sale, 9,456, that guy is in charge of this map. And it's driving all the signal out of the map because it's an outlier. He's the only value who can get a 50-point symbol. Does that make sense? And yet we all, from statistics, know if you're looking at a histogram of data, the outliers on each end, that's kind of the stuff that it's exceptional. If you want to talk about it, you can, but the meat and potatoes is in the middle, right? It's kind of like, remember, how many of you are old enough to remember in the Olympics, they'd throw out the highest and the lowest scores, usually the Russian judge or the whatever judge, and that's kind of what we're doing here. Well, you have the right to do that, and I'd argue you have the need to do that, or you're going to leave value on the table for someone else to come along and take advantage of. And in this case, Jennifer is now showing, are you doing cost?
The revenue. So showing revenue by color and by size. So some people react really well to seeing size changes, but some people are more visual with color. So this provides both for someone.
So the big sales are not just big, they're also bright white. They're jumping out of this dark base map. The dark blue sails are receding into the background. And that's something we try to do all the time with any kind of mapping, and smart mapping tries to help you with that by matching some of the color palettes to whatever base map you choose.
And we can also do different drawing styles. So we were just seeing a high to low drawing style. This is above and below. So say we cared about the 1,000. So anything above 1,000 will receive maybe a green color for good.
Yeah, something that'll jump off the map.
Yeah, let's try this one. Anything below will receive a red or orange to red.
It makes sense.
Style.
Now, we're not going to perfect each and every map while you're sitting here, because we could do the whole session on a single map and really squeeze every last drop of value out of it. Our goal is to get you using these tools to smartly apply the breaks in a way that relates to the 98.6 in your industry, whatever that is. So here's another example.
This one's fun. You have a single road, and it has the attribute of how many people drive on that road every single year. It's called the annual average daily traffic. So if we choose that, it's a count. So it's going to suggest the size, counts and amounts by size. The larger the line width, the more people driving on that road. So here's 122,500 people per day drive on this road. We also have districts, so we can add the district as a second field. So now it's going to show both the district that it's in, so districts 1 through 7 in different colors, and then as well as the line width. And you can change each of the individual colors and transparency to get a map that looks like this. So the smaller the line width, the less people are on that road, so it's going to get a greater transparency and fade into the base map.
Can you show where that transparency is applied?
Sure.
So we've got the district, and then we go into the options for the traffic volume. And then the transparency is set not as a fixed value across all features. The transparency is applied per feature, again, based on the histogram, so that you have to have at least, it says roughly 38,000 cars per day to get a 0% transparent, 100% opaque, solid color. And if you have very low traffic volumes, then you get 70% transparent. You're still on the map, but if you can cancel out of that, you're still on the map, but now you can see those roads, they're present, but they're not as demanding. And that's what's kind of new about modern cartography, is not just, hey, let's just throw all the data on the map and let the experts sort it out. You be the experts, or you interface with the experts to kind of get the things that are important to stand up off the map, and everybody else just let it recede into the map through transparency or filtering or whatever technique seems to make the sense.
Yeah, this one also uses transparency. The greater the magnitude of the earthquake, the more solid fill it's going to receive. If it's a smaller earthquake, make it transparent, let it fade into the base map. This one had a magnitude of 5.7, this one had a magnitude of 4.4, so a big difference. I like this hex mapping. Do you want to describe the hex bins?
Yeah, we can take the source data. Yeah, the bottom.
The postcode.
So these are postcode boundaries from their census. And these work well if you can show the, click on the title. If you click on the title, it'll show you the legend right there in the screen. And it has a prefigured population density that's based on the particular enumeration areas that the Netherlands census uses. And we thought what we would do is kind of bin them up using, I imagine we use the analysis option, is that right? We can show where that is. If you hit modify map and you're logged in, what you can do is run an analysis on any source layer and kind of rebin it up into these hex bins. And what that gets you is a uniform area in each and every of those honeycombs. Those hex bins has a uniform area. And then your numeric attribute can be normalized by that area. So you can see, well, how dense is the, in this case, population of an area. So very quickly, we'll show you where that option exists under analysis. You can do summarize data. And this is great when you've got, actually point data is actually even a better example. But you can aggregate points within an area or summarize within. You can start from scratch with data enrichment and say, I'd like to go get a living atlas layer and find the population, for example, like that. And we can cancel out of this in the interest of time. Where you would go, what you end up with is a layer like this, the Amsterdam population. If we go into the hex bins for it, now I noticed that unlike some of the earlier examples, these fields have what? A very nice alias. It's in this case plain English, total population. Let's choose that. One of the biggest ways you can help anybody you serve is to put aliases on your data in the source. Make sure the aliases are still there when you serve them. Just put aliases on your data. You really help your user, and you help your data get used by more and more people because they don't have to go look up some PDF on what does pop CY17 actually mean, right? So aliases are the map maker's best friend, and that's why we encourage it. So in this case, we're just taking one attribute, the total population. We happen to know that all of our polygons have the exact same area, so we can just use this as a straight up map of this count field, and then work with the histogram a little bit. In this case, the average hex bin has got 1,400 people in it. So right now, this map is emphasizing any areas that are above average. We might shift this 1,400 to say 2,800 and drop the lower limit to 1,400. Now we're emphasizing what? Those areas that are significantly above average and so forth. So dragging that slider bar, I think, is one of the most powerful things. People have been doing the equivalent of dragging this slider bar up and down. They've been doing that in ArcMap and all the previous iterations of GIS software. They've been doing that. It just took a lot longer, right? It took, you'd type it in and hit OK, and then the map would draw, and you'd be happy or not happy, and you'd open the dialog box back up, you'd change the value, it would ruin all your labels, so you'd have to retype your labels, and then So those are the kinds of things that, because we have enough people in Esri and we try to listen to our customers of where their pain points are. That's the kind of stuff we're trying to build into smart mapping going forward.
All right, so we saw how the power of changing your transparency or setting the slider on that that magic number, that average, or whatever number is most meaningful to you can really emphasize what's important and de-emphasize what's not important. Because like what Jim said earlier, people try to show everything on the map. You want to show all your data, you're really proud, but you want to tell the right story, and you want to tell a meaningful story. So these are some really easy tips, techniques to do so. So we talked about what smart mapping is, we mapped where and what, we mapped how much. So next we'll show a few examples of mapping relationships in your data. How does one variable compare to another? So let's start with the water usage map. I really like that one, and we'll go through voting results, crop harvest, predominant ancestry.
Yep, we got a few cool
Those are some
ones.
fun ones. So let's go through this one.
Yeah, a customer gave us this data at a user conference a couple of years ago, and I still love it because it represents all the parcels in Atascadero, California. And in this case, if you show the legend, every parcel in green, the greener it is, the closer it is to using 25% or more, 125% year over year. So there's a comparison of 2013 to 2014. Parcels in green used more water in the second year than the first. Parcels in brown used less water, so their lawns are probably brown. That was the inspiration of color. And then you can poke around the map to kind of see, okay, so how'd this parcel do? How'd that parcel do? And you can kind of get a sense overall. I mean, I don't know about you, but I see more brown than green. Maybe that's just me, and that would probably be a good analysis to do, right? And that's what I mean by sometimes just making an interesting or thought-provoking map will cause you to ask a broader question. Well, how did we do overall? And sometimes we start off with the overall. We see the news story that Atascadero Water District says that they reduced water by X%. Oh, well, let's go see if that's true in my neighborhood. We kind of try to go either direction. You know, every great map has a great idea, it's got data, and it's got a map that executes on that. It's a triangle. You have to have all three. Where you start, it's up to you. I mean, a lot of times we start with the data. Here's this data set, what can you do with it? Okay, I'm gonna go find a subject matter expert and talk to them. And we will often, if you don't mind clicking on, can you strip the attributes, can you strip the pop-up off for just a second? We'll come back to this. We'll make this point while it's fresh. You gotta hit modify. And then just temporarily take the pop-up off and then add it back in. And then I'll show you what I do as a very successful technique. Click on any attribute or any feature. And we're not gonna configure it, we're just gonna, yeah. So see that? This is called the rows and columns pop-up. By the way, this is the sign. This is how we can tell that a map is unloved. When we see this pop-up with the rows and columns, we cry a little tear, especially if we see no aliases. We cry out of both eyes.
All underscore
and
13.
we say, you map, you're just not loved yet. You're worth it. You're worth loving. And what I do very successfully is I'll talk to a subject matter expert or whoever gave me the data, and I'll just click on one parcel, especially if it's their house. And I'll just say, hey, tell me about this data. Like, what's important in here? And 9 times out of 10, the next sentences out of their mouth, that's your pop-up. Because they'll tell you, oh, well, we got 2013 water usage, that's in thousands of gallons, and we got 2014. And so you can easily see who's increased their usage or decreased their usage. That's how we value this data. So a lot of times that interview process, that's where my pop-ups come from. I don't invent them out of my head unless I absolutely have to. And then the symbology here is pretty straightforward. It's take the 2014 number, add another attribute, the 2013 number. I should have aliased this. I'm gonna cry. And then we choose a style called compare A to B, where it's a very interesting style. If we hit that labels tool, watch what happens to the legend. So it actually changed the text of the legend. Now it's showing the ratio of all 2014 to 2013 usage. Hit labels again. Now it's showing 2014 usage as a percent of 14 plus 13. Now that's not what I want. Hit it again. Well, back to where we started. Now I'm showing 2014 as a straight up percentage of 2013. So I don't have to write that equation. I don't have to worry about null values and divide by zero issues. It just handles it for me and does the math and gives me, look at that histogram. You know you got a great map when you got a histogram. Your data is in good shape when you have any kind of histogram with some kind of bell curve, right? It could be biased one direction or another, but when you got a curve like this, you're in good shape. So the X bar, if we just treat all parcels as equivalent, you know, my house parcel is equivalent to the school district's school parcel, well then overall water usage increased 7%. So we probably want to dig in a little further to kind of weight that properly. But now we have the information we need to kind of make a smart map. Now the average of the data, well, that's interesting, but I know if I sit in a room with a reporter or the mayor or the head of the water district, they would just want to know who increased and who decreased. So I'm going to anchor this map, my 98.6. I don't need to read up on it. I don't need to do a study. I just want to know who increased or decreased, right? So 100% is where I anchor this map. And then it's kind of arbitrary to decide, well, where do I want to put those breakpoints? And what we're saying is, all you outliers below 75%, all you outliers above 125%, I'm choosing to ignore you. It's a choice, it's an editorial choice. It took me 6 months of working in the group I'm in now. I joined 7 years ago. It took me 6 months to deprogram myself that it's okay to make an editorial choice on a map. Because you do, you get the data people yelling at you, you get the cartographers yelling, you get everybody yelling at you, and it's like, no, just hear me out. There's a great map in here. Let me show you where it is. Mm-hmm. It takes a little assertiveness in whatever style you like to be assertive.
So we have about 20 minutes left.
Oh my gosh, we got to speed
I really
it
want to
up.
get to expressions.
Hit it.
The new. So let's talk about predominance real quick.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
love predominance mapping.
You're the boss.
So predominance mapping is pretty much an election map. Who won? You know, which one of your variables, if you compare out 5 variables together, which one wins? Which one has the greatest number? So this is a great example of a predominance map. If a Republican won, give it a bright red, and if a Democrat won, give it a bright blue. And if a Democrat slightly won, so 238 to 255, give it a darker, more transparent blue, and same with the transparent red if the Republican slightly won. So this is a great example of a predominance map. We recently released this ancestry data set to the Living Atlas. And in this data set, there are over 100 different ancestries that people reported as their dominant ancestry to the US Census. And so we chose 5 major European ancestries and immediately saw these patterns. So you can add up to 5 in smart mapping, and it says, okay, you added 5 categories. We're going to do predominance drawing style. So the predominant ancestry in New York is Italian. Boston, you see a lot of Irish. If we go north, you see a lot of French near Montreal, Quebec, and a lot of Germans to the west, and English and Irish to the south. So you can go into any of your data sets, add the fields you want to compare. For example, this is an old friend of ours, crops, one we showed earlier. So we added, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we added these corn, wheat, soybean, cotton, and vegetables, and it showed us which counties had the most popular crop as corn or wheat. And so that's a fun one to try with your data.
That's an exciting possibility. The ability, as soon as we realized we could compare 2 fields, of course, we got greedy and said, could we do 3, 4, 5, 6?
Right.
They stopped us at 5 in the user interface because, user experience has to be a factor. But in code,
right,
you can do any number. And I think that's what all of you as developers or managers of developers should be very excited about, that you can transform 5 columns of data into one map without having to, what would we do in the old days? We'd get the source data, we would add a column, we would give it a name, we'd give it an alias, and then we would calculate it, and then we would have some divide by 0 problems, so we'd write some code around that, and then we'd have some null values, and we'd write some code around that, as opposed to, let's just map it and see what happens. And whether that's through the user interface or through expressions, as we're about to show, it's very exciting.
Right, you described the old way of doing things, adding the field or republishing your data. Now if you grab an authoritative data set, like from San Bernardino County. Jim recently made a map of parcels, but he didn't want to download the map, add the field that he needed to make the map that he needed to make. So he used expressions, and I'll show you what that looks like.
This is making maps out of thin air.
Right.
Right? This is making maps from attributes you don't actually have.
So this is not in the table, but if you needed a field, you can add it yourself now with expressions. So you can click on the drop-down menu for the first step, and at the very bottom, in the recent release of in ArcGIS Online, you can add expressions here. So do you want to talk through this one?
Yeah, great. So in this case, the task, someone saw a map and said, "Can you do that for Redlands?" I said, "Yeah." And I thought to myself, that'll take 2 weeks because I'm going to have to download the data. And then I found this open data parcels data set that was already hosted and running. So I thought, okay, we want to show, I was instructed, we want to show the relationship between land value and improvements. We want to know those parcels that are sort of in need of development. So to hit the expression, at first I did it in the user experience, right? I just chose the two fields, land value divided by land plus improvement value, and that gives me the percentage of value that is from the land. And then I noticed, hey, all the weirdo parcels with 0 land value and 0 parcel value, they're ruining my map. And the customer noticed it. He said, "Why aren't these parcels on the map?" And we clicked on it, and we saw it was a divide by 0 issue going on. So in code, this is just a very simple scripting language. Arcade is wonderful to use. It's very similar to Excel. We're able to, I'll just walk through this description real quick, and then we'll kind of run through. I created a variable called land, and I knew it was going to use one of my features called land value, one of my attributes. But I noticed that land value was hosted as a text field. And how often does this happen? Too often. But it happens. And in the past, this would have shut me down. Like, hey, boss, I know you want this map, but I can't do it because they hosted it this way, and it's not my fault. Now I have no excuse. I was like, I wonder if these cats on the ArcGIS Online team and the ArcGIS product team, if they put in a function that handles string manipulation. And sure enough, they have a function called, it's called replace. And it's down here, way down here. So replace has got an explanation of how it works. It replaces some value with some other value. And I had noticed that, these strings, they have a comma in the middle of them, so that's not gonna parse well. So you had to replace the commas with a blank, and then once it was replaced, convert it to a number. So now I got the land value as an actual number, and I didn't have to call the county to say, would you please fix your service? Right? So that's wonderful. And then now I'm able to handle the 3 cases that I was worried about, right? The first case, when land is 0 value and improvement is 0 value, I want you to assign a 50-50 split because 50% of 0 is 0. So it's an arbitrary number, but I just wanted to transform. This is an ETL. I'm transforming my data to make the map I need. When land is not equal to 0, but the improvement is equal to 0, then I want you to say land is 100% of the value, and I'm not doing a divide by 0. Otherwise, it's the third case. Land is, the value I want this script to return is land divided by the sum of the 2 times 100. Return the answer. You can hit test, and it'll give you a test value, which is very nice. And then you can also substitute your own values as test cases. So if I want to type in some test values, I can type the number in and just hit test, and it'll test using that actual value. So it's a very convenient way for you to kind of prototype out what your script really does. And then when you're done, it renders the map based on the expressions returned. In this case, I took numeric data, did an evaluation, and I returned numeric data. I could have taken numeric data, done an evaluation, and returned a string just as easily. And now this map is something that went from, I think this in total time, including me learning expressions and writing a quick email to my friend Christian about how this replace thing works. Total time from I want a map that does this to delivery was 2 hours, including time for me to learn, shove it in a story map, send it over via email and say, is this kind of what you're looking for? And then we've been having a successful discussion ever since then. That's what I appreciate about expressions. It's pretty cool. This is one of Jennifer's maps.
Here's a simpler example.
Yeah, right?
So I looked at the emplanements at every airport in the US from 2001 to 2011, and I wanted to see which airports had an increase in emplanements and which ones had a decrease. So I used expressions, and you can convert quantities to a text. So if the difference is greater than 0, then have it called increase. You can change this to anything you want. So there was an increase, or whatever. And it'll update in the legend. And you can also add different plane symbols. I also added an expression to show the rotation. So if there was a huge increase, then have it at a 45-degree angle. So you can do that in smart mapping as well. And I'll show you where.
You didn't have the decreases going down?
I didn't think that would look too good, planes going down.
That's a good call. But that's some of the real stuff that happens when you're trying to make a meaningful map, is you run into some cultural sensitivities that it's like, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't be pointing airplanes at the ground. Let's just do it this way.
There's a rotate symbol option, and you can add an expression for the rotation. And we did this with this tax. So if there was an increase in tax, then make the $ point up, the arrow point up. And if there's a decrease, make the arrow point down. And if you care to look at the different degrees of increase or decrease, you can do so with this kind of map. But I would suggest a legend to go with this to explain if it's completely up and down, it was 100% increase. If it's a 45-degree angle, it's a slight increase, etc. So this is a good starter map.
And these examples we give, we're not saying you have to do things exactly like this to be successful. Our objective is to stretch our thinking and our technology and our workflows. And we'll go a certain distance. I think on our team, we always try to stay pragmatic. Like, is this a map that communicates? Is it useful? We're not looking to win awards or be called beautiful maps. But we want the beauty to come from the information that these things communicate. And that's the whole inspiration behind presenting this at this conference. We didn't write a lot of code here. I hope that's okay with y'all, because really this is about engaging with the data and a subject matter expert to kind of iterate quickly using smart mapping to get something on screen that causes conversations to move forward. Like to me, the only bad map is a map that ends conversation. Like people look at it and go, okay, didn't need to see that. That's a bad map. Like, you lost them. I would rather put airplanes pointed in different directions and put that in front of the director of the FAA than risk another traditional map that we've tried for 30 years, right? So it depends on where you are on the spectrum, the nature of your customers. Some customers enjoy a little creativity. Some are a little more conservative, and you got to deal within that. But we find showing examples is by far one of the best ways to kind of stretch people's thinking. They're not necessarily going to ask you, hey, will you please stretch my thinking? So we tend to deliver, like we did a crime map with the city of LA recently, where they asked for one thing and we gave them that one thing, but we also gave them this alternative, and they went for the alternative. So we felt very validated by that. It's a good repeatable pattern. Do you want to take questions now?
Yes.
I'm sure there's questions.
Okay. Yeah, we got 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and then we can stay after if anyone else.
Certainly.
Is there going to be an organization create a color palette to load onto ArcGIS Online, so it's always the default for the organization?
It's a good question. The question was, is there going to be an option where an organization could load its own palettes, perhaps symbols, colors, widths, line styles, and things like that? I'm trying to prognosticate the future. Jeremy, would you have any comment on that? No, not at this point.
Probably be another year. So rewriting the map before it fell to
So that's not a no.
Yeah,
That's a good thing.
And with ArcGIS Online, you can set themes. So if your organization uses a blue color scheme, you can set that for all the story maps that people create.
And in
So
code,
that's a good
obviously, if
thing.
you write your own code,
Yeah.
you can do anything you're able to do in code. Sir?
Excuse me, the last set of maps you have, the dollar sign pointing up and down, are those custom icons or are those icons you can find?
Yeah, and this map, Jennifer, is this a custom icon or is this something you found? How'd you do this?
So I found an icon on the web,
An
and then
SVG?
a PNG.
PNG?
Yeah, and you can copy and paste that into your symbol. But I decided to make a custom one instead. But this is what it looks like.
You should write a blog on this.
I should. So here's the symbol, and you can use an image. You can use many different icons that we already have, or you can copy and paste an image from any .png image.
So to the first question, this is a
GIF or JPEG.
This is a way to kind of get your symbol set going in the interim.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Any chance you could show us one of those sort of more customized looking pop-ups instead of the plain field by field one?
Can we show one of the more customized pop-ups? Why don't we do, the structure of it. Let's do, one with a chart and a graph maybe.
Chart and a graph. Oh, sure. Let's see.
Text where you get just sort of like a sentence of text with
Okay, sentence of text, that would be, this is a good one.
something like that.
Yeah, let's pull that open. This is one of the most powerful ways to get your data to be meaningful is let people touch it and then give them both text as well as the numbers. So you've given them the visual pattern on the map, they've touched their neighborhood or something they're interested in, and then it's really just about writing a sentence that flows into the value of the attribute.
All right, so these are all the fields in your data set. So we've got male population, female population.
Aliased.
Average household size, aliased. So you can add, total, female, pop. And you can bold it, make it larger, smaller, change the color, the font. You can add images. You can also add a pie chart or a column chart. So this one the pie chart shows male to female ratio, and you can hover over the charts to see the exact numbers.
Tend to use pie charts if you have 2, 3, maybe 4 pie slices. Tend to switch to column charts if you have 4 or more. People tend to react better to your pie charts if the fewer pie slices they have. I'm the same way with pie at home.
So I just added a column chart to compare total pop to total households.
More questions?
Yes.
Are there colorblind friendly palettes?
That's a great question. Are there colorblind friendly palettes? We have
Good
taken
question.
pains to include
Yes.
specific colorblind friendly palettes from the Cindy Brewer Color Brewer collection, as well as some other things. Every single palette we put in, we test not only for color blindness to either know it is or it isn't friendly, but we also test for kind of spectrally, how do they look? Is there enough color separation among these when they get applied in a typical fashion? So if you have favorite color palettes you want to recommend, we're always listening. Send them our way, send examples. Jennifer and I both love to receive emails about what you think a great map is or what you think a map is that is great but difficult to make. We're always interested in those use cases. So I'm JHERRIES at Esri.com and JBell, that's pretty easy, JBELL at Esri.com.
Yeah, so for each drawing style, there's a different color ramp. So this is the high to low, showing low values at the bottom and high at the top, where you can flip them over like this. And depending on the base map that you have selected, right now I have the dark gray base map, and so it's going to suggest to me ramps that work best with the dark gray base map.
So what happens if you switch the base map?
If I switch the base map to light gray, let's see what they offer. So it automatically switches to a ramp that works better with light gray.
And then the options change as well.
And the options change. Yeah, so let's see the above and below.
We try to put you in the ballpark. Jennifer has a strong preference for dark gray base maps. Just a note, everything you learn about cartography on a light gray background, intensity gets darker. Like if you have a red color ramp, the intense values get a darker red. When you put a dark gray base map under it, things flip. Brighter things are more intense. But a lot of times we see people just kind of throw the same old color ramps on a dark, and they're wondering why it didn't work so well. So just, for example, here, all the intense voting are the bright areas, not the dark areas. It's all in the application of it. Right. We tend to always recommend, if you're doing a thematic map, drop all the color out. I made a trail map the other day for somebody, just LA trails. I think it's being shown in demos, where the base map was so colorful and the trails were so colorful, and the parks, they wanted to signify parks with 4 different colors. There was just too much color going on, right? And it's just, this isn't a Mona Lisa painting. We're just trying to get a clear point across. If it's a trail map, what should jump out at you? The trails. Right. And everything else is secondary. So another ninja secret we have is just de-emphasize everything and force things to rise to the top through discussion, thought, analysis, and your maps, the signal to noise ratio of your maps will dramatically increase simply because you desaturate things that don't matter.
It seems like the heat map is kind of the default for showing density at different scales. I was wondering if you'll ever have like a clustering sort of concept built into like web maps for like points to cluster at certain scales, and then also like if you have a lot of line work, kind of spaghetti or road networks, really dense, but want to showcase that as potentially like a point or a cluster in some way at a regional or statewide scale versus local.
Yeah.
Are you going towards? Are you thinking about that? I'm sure you are.
Yeah, definitely thinking about it on the point clustering. There's definitely the ability to create a custom app that does that kind of point clustering. We're trying to challenge ourselves to think more aggressively about why do you need to cluster? And what do you want to show when it is clustered? Because sometimes we see maps where they just cluster it up and they give you a number. What does that do for me, right? Now I know how many objects I'm not seeing, but I'm not actually seeing a pattern yet. I'm just seeing, well, there's some stuff here and you'll have to zoom in to find out what's there. Maybe that's satisfying, but we're always very aggressive about asking, well, what do you want to see at this scale? So the answer is yes, clustering at a custom level right now is available. You can do that. I think it's a topic of interest at this point. And then we've done some interesting things with sort of, clustering of roads in a similar fashion, like, kind of binning it up. Hex bins are a great way to kind of bin things up to kind of get the conversations going. I'm not sure I've heard exactly what the right maps are for clustering, other than give me a symbol with a number counting how many things are under there. And it's not always that often that counting is enough. It's usually maps of counts are usually a step on a road towards an information product that actually answers a very specific question. So we're aggressive. We always go for, well, what do you want to know about this? Why don't we make you that map? And if clustering turns out to be that map, yeah, we'll end up there.
The crowdsourcing story map does the automatic clustering of your web map. And some other story maps do that too.
Yeah, the other day I did a hex bin of every ArcGIS Online request for a certain day. They gave me a data set, there were like millions of requests, and I did a hex bin of it, and that was very satisfying just to kind of cluster it up that way. If there's no more questions, we want to thank you for coming out to Palm Springs. How many of you came from colder weather to get here? Yeah, take a photo, send it home, see if your relatives talk to you when you get back. Thank you all.
Thank you.